Hi, this is James, and for today's video, I'm talking about spontaneity and creativity and creative endeavors in general. I make music, so there's sort of an undertone, I guess, of music throughout this, and that's the main medium. But I do want to begin talking about typewriters, and specifically modern programs that emulate an aspect of typewriters, which is the inability to go back. And I think one of the things that technology has created that's both good and bad, and this is not a new discovery I'm making by any means, but the ability to delete stuff, especially when you're doing something creative. Redoing something is so liberating, because before it relieves so much pressure, and the problem is that it feeds into a sort of perfectionism. And whenever anyone thinks that they're like a perfectionist, it usually is stemming from a sort of constant thinking of the self. Because the question is not whether what you will make is more or less perfect. I mean, obviously within reason. I'm not saying you should never revise, but the outcome is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be exactly what you want it to be, or at the very least envisioned from the beginning. The purpose of this is mainly to satisfy the constant questions of self that come up when making something. There's something very self-aggrandizing about being a perfectionist and waiting the maximum amount of time and taking the most amount of attempts possible. But at what point is it ridiculous? And at what point should we think back to what the great people did and what the classics, how they were written and how they were made? Most of it was not made with 1,000 revisions. When you think of the way studios used to be set up, things were at one point just room mics, and it was a band going in and saying, let's play this. That is the least perfectionist thing you can have. People didn't have that many tracks. 8 tracks recordings were a big deal at one point. And then 16 track recordings, things were so limited that the idea of wasting tape on 1,000 different things. I mean, think of it with film too, right? When people shoot on physical film, it limits the number of takes you can really get with something, and it oftentimes limits the amount of time you can spend on one shot. Now, I'm not someone who believes that arbitrary limitations imposed on yourself are good. I think it's good in the sense of constant self-improvement can be good, but I don't think self-improvement is a goal. Self-improvement isn't an actual goal as much as it should be the byproduct of trying to achieve something greater, if you're trying to achieve something at all. For example, if you're trying to get in shape, you might develop a really good habit of consistency and positive work ethic by going to the gym multiple times a week, or maybe every day, or whatever you do. But it's not out of trying to build more discipline that happens. It comes from having a goal of trying to be more in shape. So when it comes to the arts, where I think this sort of, limitation is beneficial, is through this typewriter effect of, what if you can't go back? Right? What if you have to go through with whatever it is? I'm a big believer when I make my music that I try not to kill any ideas. If I have an idea, I'm okay, I'm going to commit to this for the next half hour or hour. I'm going to see okay, this is my bridge idea. What's going to happen? And then if it doesn't work, I'm okay, you know what? This could be a solid pre-chorus, or this could be whatever. Or sometimes, if I really need to, I'll delete the whole thing. But that's not often, because I don't really believe in that. I think when you're working on something, you're constantly revising it as you're making it. You don't need to revise it so much after the fact. Once it's there, it's there. And I think sometimes the problem people more have is with the thing itself as a whole. So if I make a song where I'm there's just no way I can make a bridge here, and it's really needed, or this chorus just feels off, there's something about it is just not hitting right. It's not because the verse is usually so great. It's not because, the sonic textures are worth pursuing for the whole thing. It's usually the whole thing is maybe propped up by one good aspect of it. Sometimes, you get in a bad habit of always following through on stuff that you don't need to follow through on. I'm not advocating for that. But I think it's recognizing okay, I'm not going to constantly revise something just to not like it. And there's sort of a tension in recognizing that, right? The tension is that it's whatever's going to happen stays. And it's a really interesting thing, and it's the tension that's in jazz. When you read On the Road, you'll hear Kerouac, like the way he describes jazz kind of embodies this a little bit. I mean, granted, he also adds a lot more about like the performance element, but still, jazz recordings are almost always done in a live way that allows for so much improvisation. And obviously playing jazz in real life, you know, I've done that. It is built on improvisation so much, and having a knowledge of the craft as a whole. So then like you're able to help other people out, you know, you're setting other people up. It's a feel. It's a reason why there's so much like philosophy of jazz, in the sense of like the way different performers talk about it. There's a lot more like metaphysical components baked into it. And a lot of that has to do with spontaneity. Well, and as much as you're trying to help someone else prop them up for a good solo, you're also trying to recognize other people are trying to do the same for you, and recognizing your opportunity, and knowing once you start something, you have 16 bars to do it. You know, it not that it always has to be 16 bars, but more in the sense of you can't just do something once, right? A lot of people say in jazz, it's like, if you make a mistake, do it twice and it sounds intentional. Now, of course, this is goofy, you know, mentioning like the discordance of certain things, but it is true. Things mainly sound discordant because they've only been done once. And once you do it again, all of a sudden it has a really nice feel with the track. It's like, oh, this is intentional. This is what it's supposed to be. I think this is true for spontaneity broadly across all creative things. And once someone recognizes the feel of something, it completely changes the way they view the whole thing. One of the things I like is like Matt Johnson movies. I just watched a Tony movie and I really liked it. It's probably my favorite movie of the year so far. I really like the drama as well. But one of the reasons why I liked it is because you could tell there was a sort of looseness throughout all of it. It was very conversational. It was almost, I hate making this comparison because I don't think Matt Johnson is at this level or close to this level yet, but a John Cassavetes thing of getting people to be so in a character that it doesn't matter the same way that it does in other movies to be perfect, to have the blocking exactly quite right. It's more about fully living in the scene, and then it encapsulates you in a certain type of way. That's what I think is important, capturing the essence of something. If you can capture the essence, the purest form, the nuances that follow fit in accordance with that. Whereas if you build out the nuances and focus on that to achieve the core, it doesn't really work the same way. Take basketball, for example, right? You can run a lot of plays. But at the end of the day, there's going to be moments where there's going to be an ISO with a defender, and someone's going to have to dribble a certain way or make a pass that no one's expecting. You can obviously run a bunch of plays and only do that, but there's so much natural improvisation in the way something gets executed. And even when you think of like a more practical thing, right? The productive element of committal to spontaneous, to improvisation kind of helps. Like, imagine if everyone, when giving a speech, played it to the crowd and that was it. It was just like, here you go, you know, it's this demographic. They're going to want to hear about this. I'm going to talk about this. And that's it. And then you lose all character. So the point of public speaking is to convey that character in an accessible way, you know, that translates what you're trying to get across. So when I think about not, you know, reversing something and that sort of committal, it's recognizing the moment-to-moment way of living that's inherent to being alive, you know, and that's why I think jazz is so tenuous, you know, but through that tenuous like nature, it has a strong foundation. It's ironic, right? And that's the whole thing with spontaneity, is when it's baked into something, the uneasiness makes it feel steady. Whenever I record vocals, and I'm not a vocalist, right? Like you can tell if you've heard my music, I'm not really a vocalist. However, one of the things I do is I always, you know, when writing the lyrics, when coming up with the vocal melody, you know, you come up with the vocal melody first, usually the rhythm, then you kind of finalize the melody a bit. Then you get the lyrics, how you want them to be, making sure it fits, whatever it is. And then once you've sat down with that, you might go through it however many times you get comfortable with it. But whenever I record, I always notice I change the vocal melody, and usually one or two of the lines get tweaked. Even though I've done it many times before, I've practiced, I've gone through it for hours, and then I record it, and all of a sudden, the live finalizing element of it makes me discover usually what's the more catchy thing to do, what's the more inviting thing to do, what gets people to pay attention to this in a good way, not just what matches the chords going on, and not what makes sense in a structural level to make sure, you know, the syllables fit right in the right place. Now, I'm not saying I'm great at it by any means, but I am saying that it's something that's inherent to anyone who does it. So I think it's something to be embraced in all aspects of it. I don't think it should just be limited to the live performance. I think you can incorporate it at all levels. It's why, like, certain types of prose, like very much work, and stream of consciousness can be so great when it is great, and it can also be so bad. But when stream of consciousness is like truly good for the writer, it can create some of the best work, ever done. Yeah, this isn't one of my typical videos because it's not like based in the industry or one specific like cultural thing going on in the arts. However, I do think it's just so ingrained in everything. I guess if I were to conclude this, I would just say like appreciating the random nature of things, even though there's intent in the exact seconds that something happens, in the exact moment. Someone's a different person from when they breathe in to when they breathe out. Things are constantly evolving and changing. And when you recognize that and someone leans into that and gets the truth out of an individual moment, what was true for them when they were actively doing something, and someone captures that in a meaningful way, to me, it just creates such a great feeling. It's celebratory. It makes the art celebratory. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you want.